Welcome back to this explainer. Every time we ask ChatGPT a prompt, or stream a 4K video, or even just plug in our electric cars, we're actually relying on a rock that someone pulled out of the dirt. We love to think about AI and the green energy transition as purely software, right? We picture code, algorithms, and the cloud. But the truth is, it's all incredibly grounded. These massive technological leaps are physically bottlenecked by raw materials. Specifically, they are bottlenecked by copper. Today, we're going to look at why the real ceiling for this AI and electrification boom isn't silicon chips, but the actual mined metal we absolutely need to move that power.
Let this reality just kind of sink in for a second. Copper is not optional in an electrified world. It's incredibly conductive, super durable, and honestly, almost impossible to substitute at scale. Think about it. Power has to be generated, transformed, transmitted, and consumed. Copper is literally the central nervous system of that entire chain. Without it, our whole modern technological miracle just stops dead in its tracks.
So here's our roadmap for today's explainer. First, we'll cover the AI copper bottleneck. Second, the massive supply deficit projected by the IEA. Third, we'll look at the Grasberg mine and real-world operational constraints. And finally, number 4, how we actually value a major player like Freeport-McMoRan in an environment of total scarcity.
All right, let's dive right into Section 1, the AI copper bottleneck.
The International Energy Agency, the IEA, just put out this projection that global data center electricity consumption is going to more than double by 2030, hitting roughly 945 terawatt-hours. AI is, of course, the absolute main driver here. Now, 945 terawatt-hours is a massive number, so to put that into perspective for you, that's roughly the entire annual power consumption of Japan, just for data centers. And the thing is, this digital demand doesn't magically exist in the cloud. It has to physically plug into the power grid.
Because you see, AI data centers don't just need those fancy GPUs. To handle that insane power load, they need physical transformers, substations, massive heavy-duty switchgear, huge backup power systems, and just miles of cooling infrastructure. And guess what? Every single one of these components, literally down to the wiring inside the concrete walls, relies heavily on copper. It's the inescapable physical footprint of our digital future.
Moving on to Section 2, the IEA's supply deficit.
So looking again at the IEA data, specifically their Global Critical Minerals Outlook 2025, we are staring down a pretty harsh reality. Copper demand is projected to shoot up by about 30% by 2040. But the expected supply from all the currently announced mining projects, it falls drastically short. In fact, the IEA is warning us of a projected 30% supply deficit for copper by 2035. That is a massive, gaping hole between what the world needs to build the future and what the Earth is actually prepared to give us.
Just look at the math here. It's a brutal macro imbalance. We have this relentless demand pull of 945 terawatt-hours driven by AI slamming right into a 30% supply constraint by 2035. Honestly, the numbers simply do not work without some kind of seismic shift in how we produce this stuff.
Which brings us to Section 3, Grasberg and operational constraints.
To truly grasp how this scarcity plays out, we have to look at the folks actually ripping this metal out of the ground. Take Freeport-McMoRan. They aren't some agile tech startup. They are a legacy global copper champion. They built incredible scale over the years, mostly through their legendary Grasberg district in Indonesia. Then they diversified, building a massive base in the Americas with assets like Morenci and Cerro Verde. And after spending years aggressively repairing their balance sheet through really disciplined spending, they are now perfectly positioned as one of the premier suppliers of the strategic minerals our modern economy is basically starving for.
But here's the catch. You can't just spin up a new copper mine like you'd provision a new cloud server. Bringing fresh copper online is brutal. First, you have to actually find it. Then you face years of complex permitting and the absolute necessity of securing community consent. You have to build out massive water and power infrastructure in the middle of nowhere. The capital costs are just eye-watering, and the lead times? We're talking decades, not months. The supply curve is incredibly slow because it is literally bound by geology and physics.
And you can see how this structural scarcity translates directly into cold, hard financials. Just looking at Freeport's Q1 2026 numbers, the impact of this macro setup is pretty obvious. They posted revenues of $6.234 billion. Their realized copper price was extremely strong at $5.78 per pound, which drove 657 million pounds of copper sales. When global supply is this tight and demand is surging, the companies sitting on high-quality assets capture immense value.
However, and this is totally crucial,
High copper prices don't suddenly erase operational friction. Even with that great Q1 pricing, Freeport actually had to lower its 2026 sales guidance down to 3.1 billion pounds of copper. Why? Because they hit ramp-up delays at their massive Grasberg block cave in Indonesia. It just goes to show that even the absolute top-tier assets, managed by the best in the business, face wild, unpredictable operational roadblocks.
So let's recap these operational constraints quickly. You've got sky-high AI demand, intense capital requirements, painfully slow permitting, and real-world hurdles like those Grasberg delays. All of this puts a hard ceiling on how fast supply can actually grow. And why does this matter to you? Because ultimately, this bottleneck dictates how fast our future can be built, heavily driving up the costs of everything from your next EV to the reliability of your local power grid.
Let's turn to Section 4, Valuing Freeport in Scarcity. To really understand how a giant like Freeport operates financially, we have to talk about a brilliant mechanism known as byproduct credits. See, when Freeport mines for copper at Grasberg, they don't just pull up copper, they also extract massive amounts of gold and molybdenum. Now, the revenue they get from selling that secondary gold is actually subtracted from their cost of mining the primary copper. It's a game changer. These byproduct credits drastically lower their net cash costs, giving them insane operational leverage whenever copper prices start to run.
The second big concept to grasp here is brownfield growth. Building a brand new mine out in the middle of nowhere, what we call a greenfield project, is incredibly risky, super expensive, and again, takes forever. So instead, Freeport leans heavily into brownfield growth. This just means expanding the mining districts they already own, especially their Americas operations like El Abra, or applying new leaching technologies to existing sites. It's a vastly lower risk, highly efficient way to bring new, resilient supply to a starving market.
So how should we actually value a company like this? Well, the absolute wrong way to value Freeport is to just blindly follow the daily spot price of copper. That completely ignores the broader commodity cycle. The better framework, the one the smart money uses, is treating this as a long-duration play on a fundamentally scarce asset. You have to price in their brownfield growth potential, the eventual Grasberg recovery, and their strict capital discipline. You're really valuing their ability to generate structural free cash flow over the next decade, not just reacting to daily swings on your trading app.
So putting it all together, these are your ultimate value drivers. Grasberg's gold provides absolutely vital cost reduction. Those America's brownfield projects give them a pathway to low-risk supply growth. And strict capital discipline means they can actually survive the inevitable volatility of commodity cycles. These are the engines that turn giant rocks into durable, long-term cash.
So, to wrap this up, we've clearly seen that our big, shiny ambitions for AI data centers, EVs, and modern power grids are colliding head-on with physical reality. Copper is the absolute bottleneck. The demand is structurally locked in, but the supply is completely boxed in by geology and operations. So I'll leave you with this one defining question to think about. Can a company like Freeport successfully convert this era of structural copper scarcity into durable long-term free cash flow, all while navigating these immense operational minefields? Because honestly, the answer to that question is going to dictate the true pace of our entire electrified future. Thanks so much for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.